Jacob, thanks for joining us. We're recording this the day after Graham Linehan has been arrested at Heathrow Airport, reportedly for sharing 3 tweets expressing his trans views. So 5 armed guards or armed police officers. What's your take on that? How do we get here?
It's most peculiar. What made the police think that a middle-aged comedian was such a high risk that it was going to take 5 policemen to arrest him? Couldn't just one of them done it? Couldn't it have been done when he'd got home? Because these aren't serious charges, they're pretty minor charges. Taking him in that way, treating him as if he were a terrorist, is overkill. I mean, I do understand that the police in Heathrow are routinely armed. That's perfectly reasonable. But 5 of them, didn't they have other duties to attend to?
I mean, the question is why any at all? Is free speech more fundamentally under threat? That's the question. Shouldn't he just walk straight through baggage and took his stuff and gone home?
That's the second stage, isn't it?
Yeah.
The first stage is, was this proportionate, even if a serious crime had been committed? It wasn't proportionate for somebody of his age and status. It was overkill. And if you use lots of police to make a minor arrest, you subtly undermine the principle of innocent until proved guilty, because you make the person who's arrested appear to his fellow citizens to be guilty, because this gets seen. Admittedly, he was taken off in a van, but nonetheless, people on the aeroplane would have seen it. They would have thought that's a major criminal. And that's the aim of this. It's what totalitarian states do, that they use the security services, the police, to humiliate people who are accused of wrongdoing, particularly if the wrongdoing is political. And this is essentially political. It's about Linehan's views on the trans issue. And I think that people should be free to express their views on that issue. And the question then becomes, do his tweets in any way incite violence? And here, I think the standard must be a high one, that it's got to be somebody saying, I think we should all turn up at number 22 Acacia Avenue and burn down Mr. Snodgrass's house. I'll be there at 7:30. Are you joining me? It's got to be clear, well-defined, an actual plan of violence, rather than this slightly nefarious, I don't like these people, I would kick them in an uncomfortable place, or whatever it was he said. That seems to be a long way from genuinely inciting violence.
Yeah.
It's of course right that there are rules to stop incitement of violence. Perfectly sensible. But to use them on something that is fundamentally trivial and arguably humorous is actually using it for political purposes to stop people making this argument. And the most sinister thing, what is the one bail condition placed on Mr. Linehan?
I don't know.
The one bail condition, and this police bail, not court bail,
Yeah.
is he's not allowed to go on Twitter. So what do they do before he's found guilty of anything? They limit his freedom of speech. This seems to me to be an absolutely monstrous abuse of police power, and in some ways the most extreme abuse of their power in a whole bevy of abuses.
Yeah, I mean, the timing of this is relevant, isn't it? Because it comes just a few weeks after the implementation of the Online Safety Act, and we've been talking about that on Guido Fawkes. It's a very popular hot button question. Is that in of itself a fundamental threat to free speech? I mean, it was drafted under a Conservative government.
Yeah, yes, it was. I mean, I think what Linehan's got into trouble with is the malicious communications.
Sure.
So it predates this. The Online Safety Act is one of those things that politicians have to wrestle with and where there are no easy answers. I was in government at the time. I wasn't responsible for the bill, but I was involved peripherally on some of the discussions about it. And you were faced with 2 very compelling arguments. One was the importance of protecting children from danger, and there are real dangers online, and we know about online grooming and so on. The other was the protection of freedom of speech. And so the Online Safety Act is a question of balance, not absolutes. I think in the end it got the balance wrong. And I think part of the reason for this is that it had no guiding light. So in the process of the bill being developed, we had several prime ministers, we had several secretaries of state, each one took a slightly different view. So you didn't have a well thought through well and clearly authored piece of legislation. You had a series of compromises, clause by clause, and that's left a very untidy bill.
So where do you draw that line? Where do you draw that line on freedom of speech?
I'm basically very sympathetic, possibly even jealous of the Americans. I think the First Amendment is very powerful, and I'm quite a free speech absolutist. I don't want us to have a written constitution, but the idea that there should be as few constraints on you as possible is one I find very appealing.
So, on free speech, slightly more broadly, we were just talking before the camera started about your role on GB News. I've worked at GB News as well, so I'm quite familiar with how it works, and you've been there for quite some time. But it is governed by Ofcom. It is ruled by, or has to adhere to the broadcasting code enforced by Ofcom. Do you think you're ever muzzled by that in quite a significant way? Are you ever censoring yourself because of what Ofcom might do to you or the channel?
Well, Ofcom definitely tried to muzzle me.
Yeah.
That it found...
Went to the High Court, yeah.
That's right. And the High Court dismissal of Ofcom is excoriating. I mean, if you want an enjoyable read...
I've read it,
I mean, judges are not normally that rude about public bodies, but my favourite line was the judge said that Ofcom did have a duty to update its policy. It had failed in this duty, and having failed in this duty, it couldn't assume that broadcasters would know what its policy would have been had it bothered to do its job, which was just, I thought, a very clear way of showing how incompetent Ofcom is. But Ofcom is a terrible dead hand on freedom of speech. That the idea was that as a politician, you couldn't read the news. Okay, it's fine. I don't want to read the news. But I was never reading the news.
Yeah, I was just asked you to briefly explain what happened there.
Ofcom maintained that my reporting on and discussing news was reading the news. And the two are clearly very different, that if you are discussing what has happened, that is not the same as saying this is Angela Rippon or Kenneth Baker or whoever, Kenneth Kendall, not Kenneth Baker, different fellow, Richard Baker, reading the 9 o'clock news.
Yeah. So would you abolish it? Would you abolish Ofcom?
Oh, I'd definitely get rid of Ofcom. Do you know, the origins of Ofcom were in something called the Broadcasting Standards Council, which was set up by Margaret Thatcher, and the first chairman was my father.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that.
This was set up in the late 1980s in response to some terrible stuff on television.
Right.
It was a huge row, and so they set up a body to look at commercial television, not the BBC, and to try and stop basically foreign violence and porn, I think, was the aim, to stop that getting onto our television sets. Broadcasting Sound Set. Its initial budget is about £2 million. Now, Ofcom has a budget in the hundreds of millions of pounds, and it intrudes into everything. It should just be scrapped. We don't need it. And you see, Ofcom is such a 1950s body that it's regulating media as if there are 2 or 3 channels which people sit glued to and believe as gospel. This hasn't been the case for a long time.
Yeah.
What we're doing, this podcast, is basically unregulated. The online safety act
that may change.
Could potentially have some effect on it, but at the moment it's basically unregulated. And that's where media has gone. Media has been disintermediated. People are going directly to what they want, and they don't need Ofcom to get in the way. And all Ofcom is doing is making it harder for the bigger broadcasters and the people who want to do the free-to-air online broadcasting like GB News to compete.
Yeah. I want to move on to talk about the issue of national flags, because we're recording this at the start of September and over recess of the last few weeks. A big deal. Why is this national flags debate so controversial? I mean, again, how did we get here? Why are we even talking about this? Is national pride, is that something that is in decline and should be scorned in some way, particularly by the left? Is that the view you think?
Oh, I think that's why flags have become so important.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful Flanders and Swan song, the English are best. And the reason, the prelude to the song, there's some chat from Flanders and Swan about why they did it.
Yeah.
And They did because everyone knew the English were best, and therefore they didn't need to boast about it, and other countries do this boasting, and we just don't. And that's actually been true of the English, the British, for a very, very long time. We were very comfortable in our own skin because actually we thought we were a pretty good nation that had done good in the world and that the empire had been a good thing. In recent years, this has come under attack from the left, and left-wing politicians elected have to show they actually like the country. So we have the ridiculous comment from Yvette Cooper saying that her whole house is festooned with bunting and St George's crosses and the Union Jack and I think the Yorkshire flag as well. It seems so unlikely that Mr. and Mrs. Edward Balls are sitting in their house with all the decorations being bunting kept over from the Jubilee.
You never know.
You never know. But it slightly worries me that ministers, to prove they're patriotic, have to literally, not just metaphorically, wave the flag. When I was a minister, I never thought it was necessary to have Union Jacks growing out of my ears, as you now see in practically every ministerial picture, because you can't trust a minister to be patriotic. That's something wrong. And it's because the left hates the country that people have felt the need to promote their symbols of identity. And it's really interesting because normally nationalism comes from the politicians and they're trying to whip people up. This is very much a bottom-up movement. It's the British people saying, look, we're fed up with being told we're not very good and the empire was bad and that other nations are much nicer and better than we are and won't be beastly to them when we stop the slave trade and all of that. And from a bottom-up movement, you've got people saying, that's great, we're a wonderful country, and officialdom hasn't known what to do. West Hartbury, village in Somerset, happens to be the one I live in. St George's flag painted on a new and completely unnecessary mini roundabout the council wasted money putting in. Council cannot mend a pothole. Useless Lib Dem council. Oh, they get rid of the St George's flag. So don't they? Within days, it's gone. It's painted over. The bureaucrats sort of gird their loins and get into action.
Yeah.
When it's a sign of patriotism. When it's a sign of pothole, they can't be bothered.
Yeah, you mentioned Somerset. I mean, I saw, again, on GB News recently, you paid a little visit to a hotel in Somerset. You're becoming a bit of an investigative journalist, Jacob. What's going on? So what did you see? So it was a migrant hotel in your former constituency. Just outside your former constituency in North East Somerset. What was going on there? What was your take on what you saw that day?
Well, I actually thought it was quite sinister to have in the middle of the countryside. It's not a prison. They're free to come and go. But it's like a prison for anybody who wants to find out. So you've got lock gates. You've got an enormous number of security people. But the security people aren't there to protect the migrants from leaving. They're there to protect the hotel from being reported on. They haven't had any protests there. There's no security issue. It's miles from anyone. They're just there to stop people knowing about it and to keep you out, which I think is not how this country ought to operate. And I also thought it was important to talk about it because over the years, when I've been standing in Somerset and talking about Somerset and said that people in my former constituency minded about immigration, people said to me, but why? It's not a problem that affects Somerset. And this is just a reminder that this problem affects the whole country and is why the whole country is fed up with excessive illegal and legal migration. It's both of them that are the problem.
Yeah. I want to move on to talk more specifically about politics. Yesterday, Zach Polanski elected the new leader of the Green Party. I mean, first of all, your take on his election. What do you know about him? What do you think about that result?
What was that famous headline in the Times? Small earthquake in Chile, few killed. I think the election of a leader of the Greens is in that category.
But is it? Because is the left not... It's in a bit of a resurgence. You've got your party, you've got the Green... Okay, they're disparate forces, but certainly with younger people, Jeremy Corbyn, Zahra Sultana, perhaps this Zach Polanski chap and the Greens, they are a growing force. Do you not agree with that? Do you think that's happening?
I think the left is even more split than the right.
We'll come to the right.
Which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll come to that.
The more obscure left-wing parties there are, the better, with eccentric leaders who think the most remarkable things can be done to the physique of ladies by hypnosis. Most eye-watering stuff, he seems to think. And so if they have some, I hope, amiable eccentrics leading them, then that splits the left vote more, and that's really interesting for the right.
Do you think we're seeing the end of two-party politics?
I think we're seeing flux in two-party politics. As long as we maintain first past the post, ultimately two-party politics comes back. And actually, the reason we've got so many parties at the moment is failure of the two main parties. What's been the failure of the Conservatives? Not actually being conservative. I mean, this is the first time we have allowed a party to the right to steal our clothes, and this goes back to candidate selection, all sorts of things, but we eventually became quite a soggy party.
That must be frustrating for you internally.
You can say that again. And Starmer, really interestingly, the thing for which he received so much praise has ended up being his Achilles heel. So he gets rid of Corbyn, but that means that the left then have the ability and the incentive to set up new parties. Corbyn himself gets elected. Starmer has broken the coalition that was the Labour Party, and he thought that he was strong enough to break it and that the left didn't have enough influence, which actually was a pretty stupid thing to think. Why? Because Corbyn had showed he could win the leadership of the Labour Party not just once but twice. He clearly had a following, and Starmer needed that following. With first past the post, the two main parties are coalitions, inevitably. But they're coalitions that you vote for before the election rather than the coalition you get after the elections. I happen to think it's more democratic, but Starmer broke the left-wing coalition, and that has left room for Corbyn to set up his own party, the Palestinian lot, and now the Greens to move to the really hard left.
Do you think Keir Starmer is still the Prime Minister heading into the next election, whenever it is? 2029, say? Do you think he's still there?
Well, he says he is, which is always a very good sign that he won't be. That nobody asks you if you're going to carry on. If you're in a strong position, it's not a question, is it? So nobody said to Margaret Thatcher in 1982 after the Falklands, are you planning to be the Prime Minister at the next election? They say it when politicians are weak. And I look forward to Labour spokesmen coming out and saying the sort of thing I said about Boris sort of hours before he finally went.
I do remember that. I remember covering that.
Sort of he's going to go on longer than Walpole. So when a Labour spokesman says that, you'll know that the writing is very firmly on.
Yeah. So let's talk about the right. Which party is sort of a leading question? Which party do you think won the summer? Won the air war of the summer? It's recess, so everybody goes back to their constituencies. Did Reform, in your view, win the air war of the summer?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
But Kemi did very well. Kemi was in the Daily Telegraph practically every day over the summer. Kemi was working hard. The Tory party was doing things. That's a good sign both for her and for the party, because that's what she needs. Lots of long-format interviews. She's been doing the stuff to get her name out and about. Now, Nigel's been out and about for 20 years, so he's got an advantage on her. But she's been doing her bit over the summer.
But is it too little too late? I mean, I know she's only been in post since November, but we have a poll today that shows the Tories in third place again. There's a trend there. Can she reverse that trend?
Well, I think the main objective of Conservatives and Reform people should be to unite the right so that we can win an election with a large majority and reverse all the failings of socialism that have beset this country since Tony Blair was the leader of the country, or the Prime Minister. And we can't do that if we're divided against each other. But yes, the Tories being in third place is not a great base for winning an election. That's obviously true.
How do you unite the right? Because, I mean, I suppose if we had Nigel Farage in this chair, he would say, don't need to do that. Look at the trend here. We can form a majority by ourselves. I mean, even if we take your point, seem to be suggesting that the Tories are the junior partner in that relationship anyway, and so therefore Reform lead the government.
Well, that you'd have to wait to see what actually happens. Why do I think this is useful to Nigel? And you're absolutely right, he's doing well, he's going up in the polls. Is that, look at Labour currently. They have a huge majority, but no mandate. Now, why does the mandate matter? If you are in government to do important things, you need to know that you've got the country behind you. And your majority is only as deep as the confidence of your members of parliament. And if they look at their majorities and see that they only hold their seat by 1,000, they're very unwilling to do unpopular things. Actually, to reform the country, you need to do unpopular things. We need to cut welfare spending. We need to raise the pension age. It's not going to be raises all the way. It's going to be tough decision-making. And what the Tories and Reform together do is provide not just a majority but a mandate. So instead of Reform being in the low 30s, being in the high 40s with the combined vote. And that really gives you the mandate to implement the changes that the country needs.
Mm. I know Nigel Farage precedes you on GB News, right? So he's 7 o'clock, you're 8 o'clock. So you must talk to each other quite often.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
What's your relationship like with Nigel?
It's been very friendly. And Nigel got on very well with my father before me. So I'm the second generation of sympathy to Nigel.
Yeah. Do you think... What are they getting wrong at the moment? So they won the air war in the summer, okay. But Reform more generally, where do they need to improve or learn?
Reform's doing very well at the moment. I think for a member of a party that's not at 20% to point out what a party that's over 30% and has come from nowhere is doing wrong would be a bit ridiculous. They've done extraordinarily well. What went wrong for the SDP? Because that's the last time a party went from nowhere to everywhere. And what can they learn from that? The SDP didn't have the groundswell of support from traditional Labour voters that seem to have left Labour now, possibly went for Boris in 2019. So that problem doesn't seem to be there. The Falklands came along, and Labour voters, and perhaps all voters in 1983, were much more tribal than they seem to be now. So I think Reform is in a stronger position in the SDP than the SDP was, but it would be worthwhile Reform having a look at the errors of the SDP.
So if you look at their spending plans, for example, abolishing the 2-child benefit cap, the winter fuel allowance, that sort of stuff, do you look at that and think, okay, I don't particularly agree with that side of their policy?
Reform is not in a policy-making frame of mind at the moment.
Right.
It's in a campaigning frame of mind. And so although, yes, we can easily pick holes in their policies, I think all our listeners would switch off because that's not what Reform is about. Reform is about, do we stand up for the British people? Do we care about what they care about? And if we were in government, would we do something about that? It's got 3 years, perhaps 4 years to develop detailed policies, and I hope it uses that time well, but I very much doubt the things it's been saying in the last 6 months, the possible exception on immigration, will be what they present to the electorate in 2028-29.
Yeah. Are you going to Tory party conference this year?
I'm not, no.
So why are you not doing that?
Well, I went last year because I was invited by the then chairman to give a speech in the main hall, and I wasn't intending to go, and I thought it would be ungracious not to accept. I haven't been invited to do anything very exciting this year.
Yeah.
What's the party conference going to be about? When you're not in government, I went to the Tory party conference in 1997 after we had lost another big election defeat. Tory party conferences in the early stages of opposition are pretty gloomy affairs.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it looks like they're leaning towards an announcement on abolishing or leaving the ECHR, which presumably you do support. And is that what you think that's what they should do? Or should they have done it sooner?
Look, we should leave the ECHR, we should abolish the Human Rights Act, we should withdraw from the Refugee Convention, we should abolish the Climate Change Act, and we should abolish the Equality Act, just for starters. We should then get rid of the Constitutional Reform Act, so we put the judges back in the House of Lords. We need a proper constitutional restoration, and we should make our own laws, and we should reassert the sovereignty of the King in Parliament.
That's a lot. That's a lot on the menu. And obviously you were in government, so you'll have encountered Whitehall, you've encountered what you might describe perhaps as the blob and all of that. Is that, would you not face massive institutional resistance to these ideas? Let's say hypothetically, a reform government get in or a Tory, whatever, and they come with this agenda. You'll face total blockage, surely?
No. There is the great sort of cleaving axe that is a majority in the House of Commons. There was not a majority in the House of Commons to leave the ECHR in the last Parliament. Indeed, there was an overwhelming majority against. I think you might have found 200, 250 Tories who were in favour of it, and you would therefore have had 400 MPs who were against it. A lot of them, of course, being Tories. If a new government comes in, a right-wing government that has MPs who actually believe in this and want to do it, the blob can't stop legislation. They may hate it, they may scream, but at the end of the legislative process, the law is the law.
When you were in government, you must have seen some pretty grisly things in Whitehall, right? Do you not think Whitehall needs significantly paring back?
Most of the problems, not all,
Yeah.
that I faced were with civil servants saying to me, Minister, you can't do that because of the Equality Act, Human Rights Act, Habitats Directive, whatever it was, which was a law that Parliament had passed. On a couple of occasions, the civil service directly tried to stop me doing things that were government policy.
So what were those things?
Oh, the hardest one was
Yeah.
when I was trying to reduce the size of the civil service, and we were going to stop the fast stream for a few years because it seemed to me ridiculous if you were getting rid of tens of thousands of people to take on how many thousand new ones in a fast stream. The civil service hated this, so I'll happily go through it. What happens first of all is that we have one of those away day cabinet meetings. And at the end of the cabinet meeting, Boris turns to me and says about the civil service reduction, and I say we're going to cut the fast stream. Boris says, yes, that's great. This seemed to be a decision of the cabinet that we were going to stop the fast stream. Civil service then say, no, that was a political cabinet, which is absolute nonsense because the cabinet secretary was there. Right. And it wasn't a political cabinet, it was a proper cabinet, but that decision wasn't allowed. We then get back to London and we have a meeting of the board of the Cabinet Office, which decides that we will scrap the fast stream. That is deemed to be a non-binding decision because the board of the Cabinet Office is advisory, not executive. So the Prime Minister has to decide. The Prime Minister has already decided. So a minute is prepared for the Prime Minister on why the fast stream is essential, which fortunately a more helpful civil servant gives to me so that I see it in advance. And I send a note in response to this to the Prime Minister in two ways. One to him privately and one to him in his box. I discovered some time later that the one that went in his box didn't. He only got the one I sent to him privately.
Okay.
And one of the great things about working with Boris is he backed his subordinates. And so I eventually get a message from Boris saying, I've seen your note and I've told them to do what you say. And we go through this great fandangle to do something that was actually decided in a cabinet meeting. And it was the most obstructive the civil service were because they didn't want their pet scheme reduced. There were all sorts of reasons for stopping the fast stream. Apart from anything else, it's not a very effective scheme. It's not a very good scheme. And loses lots of people along the way and so on and so forth. But it was the obstructiveness that was the problem. But if you want a final point on this, I then stay in the Cabinet Office as Boris loses and goes. The minute is prepared for my predecessor to reverse this decision, for my successor, sorry. Yeah. The minute is prepared for my successor before I have left my role in the Cabinet Office.
So who is preparing that minute? Who writes that?
That is the classic blob.
Right, exactly. I think listeners hear this. These things just seem to appear out of
getting rid of the
smoke.
fast stream was not approved civil service policy, and they were determined to block it. And once I'd moved on, of course, they succeeded.
Does the Cabinet Office need significant reform? Does it need to be abolished?
I think we've got to politicise our civil service very reluctantly. I think you need... Particularly if Nigel were to win. If you were to have a government that has never been in government before, you need everybody working for you. Particularly as the civil service are probably quite snooty about reform as such, as they were about Brexit. And so I think you would need to put in many, many more people and a few special advisors, and you'd need to reform one of the last acts of the Blair-Brown period, that decides how the civil service operates. I think that Act needs to be reformed.
Do you think in that scenario there'd be mass resignations anyway? Do you think that the blob, Whitehall, would be so snooty, as you say, about a right-wing reform-led government that there'd be walkouts?
No, because they would get much more if they hung on and had to be made redundant.
So they would nonetheless. The point is, massive. That's what I was talking about earlier in terms of that institutional pressure. That's what I mean. You think that would nonetheless happen?
I think a determined government that knows how to use Parliament and knows how to use all the levers of power there.
But you need to know how to use them.
But you need to know how to use them. If you use them, you can get things done. Mm-hmm. But if you don't know how to use them, the civil service knows how to use them or how not to use them. Actually, they don't always even know that. One of the worst meetings I had with civil servants was just as COVID was beginning, and we were briefed by the Civil Service Contingency Secretariat. And the question was whether or not we'd use the Civil Contingencies Act. And as far as I could tell, the civil servants who had spent years preparing for a civil contingency had no idea how the Act worked. So they don't always know how the levers of power work.
Right. Would you abolish entire government departments? And so you talked about reducing the size of the civil service. I think, what was it, to pre-COVID levels was at least the initial plan?
Yeah. Well, I got very excited when I became Minister for Government Efficiency. The Permanent Secretary, a very capable man, came to see me and said there was this plan to reduce the civil service to 1920 levels. And I said, that's marvellous.
1920 levels?
Yes, he, of course, meant 2019 to 2020. I got frightfully excited. That's right. That's absolutely wonderful. And sadly, that wasn't going to happen. But yes, of course, you can scrap whole departments.
Which ones?
Well, let's go for culture, media and sport to start with. Let's go for the Department for Education for a second one. Let's put most of the Ministry of Justice back into the Home Office and have a Lord Chancellor's department dealing with the judiciary, because it's absolutely crazy to have the Home Office deciding who goes to prison and the Department of Justice then filling the prisons, running the prisons. That doesn't work. I think you can be much more radical than that. How much of the Department of Transport do we really need? It spends money extraordinarily badly, sending out lots of regulations. What does DEFRA do that's any use to anybody? It's quite obstructive. You may need some food standards, I suppose. Right.
What about it's different now, but when you were briefly the Business and Energy Secretary, would you have an energy department? Is energy net zero now?
Well, I get rid of that and a business department. What did a business department do? I would have a board of trade to negotiate free trade deals. Right. But you might put that on the Foreign Office anyway.
Right.
But business, energy and industrial strategy. Governments have never had a good industrial strategy in their lives.
Did you say, when you were appointed, I know it was a short tenure with Liz Truss, did you not say, thank you, Prime Minister, by the way, I think my entire department should be scrapped?
Well, we weren't going to, because it was thought time was limited, it was even more limited than we thought, we weren't going to get into the machinery of government changes at that point. But yes, absolutely, certainly the industrial strategy bit. I've never been in favour of an industrial strategy.
So looking forward, does this right-wing coalition, we'll put it in those terms for now, does there need to be a significant blueprint ahead of the election, rather than figuring it out once you're through the door? You need to have all of this ahead of time.
It's got to be pre-election, because otherwise we fight each other and we lose seats that we would otherwise win.
Right.
So this isn't a 2010 Tory Lib Dem coalition. This is a 1918 coupon election would be my recommendation. And
how much of this are you selling to the electorate? Because you said, you need to make the unpopular decisions. Would you say to the electorate, we're going to scrap this? Are you going to go hell for leather on that stuff, you think?
I think the electorate need to have a good idea of what you're intending to do and that you're intending to shrink the size of the state and therefore decrease their tax burden.
So that's how you'd sell it?
Yeah.
Let's talk briefly about taxes. Let's talk about the economy. We've got a budget on November the 26th. Is that Rachel Reeves' last budget?
Does she last that long?
Does she even last that long?
No, it was a very fair question. The bond market was very difficult yesterday. The pound has begun to wobble. Interestingly, there was a bond auction which was heavily oversubscribed. So it does seem as if the interest rate is high enough, then people are willing to buy the government's debt. And that may last. But no, she's got a very difficult budget to deliver because she's made all sorts of promises, which she's going to find it very hard to keep. The Labour MPs won't let her cut expenditure, and yet the room for tax increases is heavily circumscribed and would be economically very damaging. So it's not easy for her, and she's got those goons at the ABR who will come up with wrong forecasts again.
But tax rises nonetheless are coming. I mean, you look at those who are recently appointed. What's your take on the Downing Street reset, or whatever they're calling it, the phase 2 commencing in a couple of days ago?
Well, I found it quite hard to get enormously worked up about a group of people who I'd never heard of being replaced by another group of people who I've never heard of and have made no impact on the public psyche.
But they come from, the people I'm talking about, people like Torsten Balance on, they all come from the Resolution Foundation. And that, we've revealed this on Guido,
Yeah.
so that must send alarm bells ringing. You must look at that and think, hold on a second, we're in for real pain here.
It's a Labour government. We've always been in for real pain. I mean, this is why should I be surprised by?
No, fair point. Okay.
And I don't think they know any economics either. I mean, they don't really understand what makes businesses work, what makes economies tick, and they believe Treasury and ABR forecasts, which is something you've got to be a little bit backward to believe.
What is your most left-wing opinion? Do you have any?
My most left-wing about, I've been asked many questions over the years. I've never been asked that one.
Well, good. There we go.
So it's a new question. My most left-wing opinion is probably that in terms of children's education, particularly my own, I think they should be happy first and then they will learn. So
what does that mean in policy terms?
Well, what does that mean in policy terms? I don't know that it means a lot in policy terms, but I think that children will learn better if they're happy. Therefore, I don't think you want a culture of fear in schools to make children learn.
Does that, in terms of exams, in terms of how they're taught?
In terms of how they're taught,
Yeah.
in terms of how much you push them, particularly when they're young.
Okay. So, last couple of questions, Jacob. I don't want to keep you too long, but I do want to ask about... it's a counterfactual because you would have been the Conservative Party chair if Robert Jenrick had won that leadership election.
I'd actually been the chairman. I'm rather surprised.
Did I say...
You
no.
did.
Oh, no. Chairman.
Thank you.
My apologies. Chairman. You would have been the chairman. What did you have planned? What would that role have meant to you? What would you have done?
Well, I think one needed to learn from what Lord Woolton did after the war, when he took the Conservative Party from a failed campaigning group into a membership of 2 million. And how did he do that? How did he inspire people? How did he get across the country people not only to join but to sign other people up? And that requires effort. It requires going round, speaking to people, incentivizing people. How was it done before? It was done before with the Primrose League. So twice the Tory party has gone from no members to about 2 million members. And it's done it by introducing structures that make people think it's exciting to be a member of the Tory party. In the Primrose League, they gave people all sorts of awards and titles. With Woolton, they made it a very sociable environment as well. So I think that would have been very important. And I think the Tory party ought to have moved faster. I think it's getting to the right place. I'm really pleased by what Kemi said on drilling in the North Sea, but actually we needed to be doing that immediately she came in, because she's always believed in that. I think Kemi is a properly right-wing person, but we need to see more of what she actually believes in.
Right. And finally, I can't let you go without asking about what's been appearing in the newspapers over the last couple of days. It says you're on defection watch to Reform. Are you on defection watch? Will you join Reform UK?
I'm not on... If I am on defection watch, the watchers are wasting their time. The Home Office, I think, kept a group of people from the war watching the cliffs of Dover and the coastline until about 1995. And I'm afraid it's that type of watch that is being carried out if they're watching me.
So come the next election, we won't see you with a light blue rosette.
Well, my rosette will certainly be blue, and the reform is more turquoise, isn't it, rather than blue? I'm not.
I wasn't sure.
So I'll definitely be. You must remember, light blue is Eton's colour. So
fair enough. So no turquoise rosette for you.
I'm a Conservative. I'm a Tory. Yeah. I want the right to work together, and I want the right to succeed. And I want the policies that the right believes in to be implemented. I think by 28, 29, this country is going to be in a desperate situation. It's pretty bad now. It will get worse. And I will do whatever I can to make that work. And I want us to come together as parties. If
there's a by-election, very, very final one. If there's a by-election in North East Somerset, would you stand?
I mean, again, if ifs and ands were pots and pans, there'd be no need for tinkers. We've got to wait and see on that. And it's important to remember, even one's political opponents are innocent until proved guilty.
Jacob, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.